Hey guys, it's Joe. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make your very own backpacking pillow. Now this is a perfect beginner MYOG project. It's fairly simple and straightforward, but it's also a great way to use up some of your scrap material. If you made one of my previous projects, the DIY synthetic backpacking quilt, you undoubtedly have some insulation and scrap membrane material left over, and that'll be perfect for this project. Because this is a simple video, I'm going to try to keep it as short and sweet as possible, but before I get too deep into it, I just wanted to say stick around to the end of the video because we'll have more viewer submissions, and I'll be giving away the very pillow that I made in this video to one of you lucky viewers. Let's jump in. The materials you'll need for this project are cheap and easy to come by, but for those of you that don't have them as scrap already, I will link to the products in the description of the video and on my website. And if you buy the products through my links, you'll be giving me a little kickback and supporting the channel, and maybe buying me a cheeseburger, which I desperately need, so thank you. So there are really only 4 things you're going to need for this build: synthetic insulation, some sort of nylon material, grosgrain ribbon, and a piece of paper. And I guess thread, so maybe 5. The synthetic insulation I'm using is ClimaShield Apex I have left over from a quilt. This is a great chance to use any scraps you have, and it really doesn't matter what type of insulation you're using. Could you use down? Probably, but it would be a lot more expensive, and it would take a lot of down to get a nice, firm, supportive pillow. My shell material of choice for this build is a membrane tin nylon from Ripstop by the Roll. It's a super lightweight nylon that's not going to add a lot of weight to the project, but it feels super soft on the hand, so it's nice to sleep on, and it comes in some cool colors. And again, this is a scrap from a quilt that I built. For the grosgrain ribbon, you can use any color, any type you like. This is 5/8 inch wide. For those of you unfamiliar with US paper size, I'm using a sheet of paper that is 8.5 inches by 11 inches. For those of you unfamiliar with inches, that's about 22 by 28 centimeters. The thread I'm using for this project, and the thread I use for pretty much every project, is Gutermann Mara 70 thread, and again, I'll link that below with the other links. So the first thing you're going to do on this build is flatten out your piece of scrap material and cut out a paper-sized piece of it. And it's literally this easy. You're going to do this for your bottom shell and your upper shell. And you can do this 2 ways. You can kind of trace the perimeter of the paper with a pen like this and then cut it out with scissors. Or if you have a handy-dandy rolly knife like I do, you can also just use a straight edge and cut around the piece of paper right on there so you don't have to mark it out. Saves a little bit of time that way. Once you've cut out your first rectangle, all you have to do is cut out another one and repeat the process. Now you can use the same material you used for the first rectangle, but I like to use a contrasting color if I have one, just because it looks a little nicer and it makes the pillow pop. Another thing you could do here, it would add a little weight, but you could add a fleece layer just to have a softer pillow side if you really prefer that. I actually find this material to be more than soft enough, so I'm just going to stick with the 2 layers of membrane. Always remember, a clean workplace is a happy workplace. Once you've got your rectangles cut out, head over to your bin of insulation scraps if you have one, and pull out just a little over 2 ounces worth of insulation, or a couple handfuls, whatever works. It's about this much. Then what I like to do is actually cut up the insulation into smaller, maybe 3x3, 4x4 chunks. I just find that it stuffs the pillow a little bit better, it prevents the lumping that you might find with these bigger chunks, and it just makes everything look a little bit nicer. It doesn't really matter exactly how big they are, as long as they're smaller than these big chunks you see here. This membrane nylon has a matte side and a glossy side. The matte side is ultimately the side we want on the outside of the pillow when we're using it. So what we're going to do right now is face both of these rectangles' matte sides together and have the glossy sides facing outwards. And the reason we do that is because once we sew this, we're going to flip it inside out to stuff it, and then the matte side will be on the outside, which is what we want. So matte sides facing each other, glossy sides to the outside. Let's move over to the sewing machine. So with material this thin, I find it's extremely helpful to back it up with a piece of tissue paper. And what that basically means is we're sewing these seams on top of a piece of tissue paper. And that just keeps this material from getting sucked down into the machine, and it just makes for a much neater seam. This is a trick you can use with almost any thin material. It really works well. Before you start sewing, on the top right corner of the material, put a little mark about 1.5 inches down from the corner and left of the corner on the edge there. And this is where we're actually going to start our seams. And we do this because we need to flip this material inside out once it's sewn, and we need a place where we can stuff in the insulation. If you sewed the whole corner shut, you'd have no place to do that. Once you start this seam, remember you want to back it up so it's locked and so it's not going to come undone as you're stuffing all of the insulation in. And you can do that just by reversing a few stitches. And I'm sewing all of these edges 1/4 inch from the edge of the fabric. Once you get to the corner here, you want to stop your needle exactly 1/4 inch from the other edge of the fabric if you can. And once your needle starts to pull up, that's when you can let up the feet and turn the fabric around. And that assures that you get a nice tight corner here and you don't have the seam kind of skipping from one edge to the other and forming a diagonal corner. Then you just complete this process for the rest of the sides, like so. And once you're on the fourth and final edge, remember to stop at the mark we made and back up your stitches to lock them in. When you're removing the tissue paper, you don't want to just rip it off. I recommend kind of pulling it apart along the seam so that you're not putting any stress or distorting that seam at all. It's easy enough though. Now I like to use a lighter just to kind of seal off the edges of my material here, but you have to be really careful because this is such a thin material. You can very easily burn into it and ruin it. So just very lightly with a lighter and very quickly just seal the edges off. And I'd recommend not doing the lighter to the corner that isn't sewn. Next, you're going to cut a 3-inch long piece of grosgrain ribbon, seal off the ends of it with a lighter, and then fold it in half. This is just going to create a little tie out for your pillow, which is especially helpful if you're using it in a hammock and you don't want to lose it all the time. What we're going to do now is take the pillow shell that we've sewn and flip it inside out through the corner that we left unsewn. Then we're going to stuff in our insulation. The amount of insulation you stuff in is really dependent on your preference and how firm you like your pillow. I like to really fill it up and get it firm because that's the type of pillow I prefer, but if you like a softer pillow, you can leave it a little less stuffed. I will say, because this is such a small pillow, I recommend stuffing it as much as you can without going overboard. And once I get to the corner of it, I add in a little extra insulation and then kind of compress it into the pillow so that when I sew it, that insulation will puff back out and fill out the corner that I'm sewing. Now it's back over to the sewing machine for the final but the trickiest part of this build. The first thing you're going to do is tuck in the edges of this corner into the inside of the pillow to form a sort of 45-degree angle between the sewn edges. Along this angle, halfway across, you're going to pin in your grosgrain tie-out, which remember is folded in half. And then over top of all of this, you're going to sew a seam that just holds all of it in place and seals off the corner for good. Now this seam is a little tricky to get right, and it takes a little finagling and kind of messing around. I pinned it a little bit to keep the seam straight and to hold it. And remember, on the beginning and the end of this stitch, you're going to want to back stitch to reinforce it and lock the stitches in. And there you have it, a completed pillow. Congratulations. So back along the AT, I used a pillow that I had made very similar to this one, and it's extremely comfortable. It's much more comfortable than any of the inflatable ones, and it provides just enough neck support to be kind of the perfect height. You can see it's got about 3 inches of loft. As far as weight goes, it'll vary a little bit depending on how much you stuff it, but on average it'll be around 2.4 ounces or 68 grams. Well, that, my friends, is how you make a backpacking pillow. It's pretty straightforward and easy, and I think almost anyone can do it. It's a great first MYOG project. Like I mentioned earlier, I will be giving this exact pillow away, so if you're interested, the only stipulation is that you have to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you're not already. Head over to our Instagram page and subscribe, which is @BackcountryBanter. and then leave a comment below letting me know that you're interested. I would also really appreciate it if you could share this with anyone you think might be interested in it, or anyone that's even just into MYOG. The winner of the pillow will be announced on next week's video, and if you don't win, keep in mind you could always just make your own, or I do sell these on my website as well. To wrap up the video, here are some viewer submissions.